Before I get into it, I always like to kind of give an intro of who I am, because you're probably wondering, who's this kid on stage right now talking about LGBTQ marketing or inclusive marketing? And also, I do want to apologize in advance if I do sit down. I spent a year and a half on Zoom presentations, so I might be a little out of breath being on a stage in real life. And I'm also not used to wearing clothes right now. So again, I might be moving around a lot, so forgive me in advance. Thank you. But yeah, so again, my name is Romey. I am head of communications at Elemental. We are a full service agency. I am one of those agencies that you were talking about where we hide our budget from you all year long and we try to keep it to ourselves. But unfortunately, that is the nature of reality. But I actually love your business model and I love the fact that you brought that up because I agree with you. There are more days in the year that we need to be communicating with the audience. And I'm gonna talk a little bit more about authenticity as well in terms of like social media and how you communicate with people on social media, especially this community. But I won't go into much detail about this. I think we're all pretty experts here, being from the LGBTQ community. But what is inclusive marketing overall? For me, I always tell people, it's the future of marketing. It is the consumer being the decision maker versus the brand being the decision maker. And also inclusive marketing is about brands just kind of giving a damn about their customers. If you think about it before, back in the 80s and the 50s or the 60s, brands lived in a fourth world dimension where they could deliver their product, they can have advertising, and not really talk about social issues. That doesn't work in today's world, especially with social media. That is how a lot of people get their information, how a lot of people share news, and how people try to get insight from various groups. But also, it's about being accountable. You know, people today are trying to make brands more accountable. I'm more of a millennial, so I'm a little bit more in the social media world, but you see it a lot. You see cancel culture. You see that in the mainstream news as well, talking about how brands were offensive to a specific community. And that's because they're not really embracing inclusive marketing. And when people think about inclusivity, the first thing people think about is ethnic diversity or potentially body size diversity, which are beautiful aspects of inclusive marketing. But there's so much more to that. You have to think about whether it's a hotel brand or a restaurant, are you thinking about people with disabilities? Is your restaurant wheelchair accessible? Is your hotel staff trained on like spotting people who might have autism? If a child has sort of like an episode where they're going through issues with their autism, is that hotel staff gonna be able to like accommodate the parent and take them to a quiet room for them to calm down? Is your advertising, does it have captions for people who may be a little bit harder of hearing? Are the visuals or the audio synced up to it? All that matters because it impacts the end customer. And a lot of times when you're in the boardroom or you're in the creative brainstorm room, a lot of times you forget about the end customer. You think about my product. You think about, how do I get people to my destination? How do I get people to book a hotel room? How do I get people to eat at my restaurant? But then again, you forget about how your messaging, how the influencer you choose, how the advertising, how the models you hire, how does that impact the end customer? I'm gonna skip over the stats a little too much because I really wanna connect with everyone here on an emotional level in terms of like why it's so important. But again, I work with a lot of Asian tourism boards like Thailand. Hey, Tita. Also work with a lot of other destinations like Singapore, Indonesia, et cetera. So they do care about stats. Whatever we propose to our clients, they want to know our stats. So when it talks about inclusive marketing, what are they? 61% of Americans say that they do want to see more representation in their advertising. 69% of brands that featured representation saw an uptick in their stock. 64% of people said if they saw representation in their advertising, they will make an action to it. But again, bringing it back to social media, how does this affect social media? One, if you are living in 2021, social media is the first thing you see a brand for. I learn about new brands when I go to their Instagram. I see who they follow, I see who they like, I see who they support. But also social media has a dangerous side to it. It's gonna be how you judge your perception of a standard, whether it's a standard of beauty or a standard of acceptance. You see that on social media, whether it's a Photoshop photo, heavily filtered, but that's how you kind of judge your own self-worth. And that's the end customer that I'm gonna talk about a little bit later on. But also social media is how you show your support by liking, sharing a post, or you cancel them by unfollowing them. So before I get into like the good and bad examples of ads that I did like growing up and why I got into marketing in the first place, I want to talk about that end customer. I was that end customer. I was a brown little gay Asian kid in Huntsville, Alabama. And going to school every day, I was always told, you're not American. My mom would pick me up. Her English was very, very bad. I was ashamed of her picking me up because I didn't want her being associated with me. And then when kids would tell me, oh, you're very feminine. Oh, you're not American enough. Oh, you're never gonna belong here. And then I go home. And that kind of escapes for a little bit. And thank goodness I didn't grow up in today's world where I go home and there's social media to remind me of why I'm not accepted. Back in the 90s, when I was growing up as a kid, I would go home, turn a magazine page, and I would see people who did not look like me. I would turn the TV on, I would see people who did not look like me. Or if my mom would drive around the city, I would see billboards of people who did not look like me. So what that told me as a little 8-year-old gay kid in Alabama was that the kids in school were right. You don't belong here. You're not American enough. You're too feminine to be a guy, hang out with the guys. And then that message is reinforced because of the decisions made in the boardroom or the decisions made in the creative brainstorm of why a model, or in today's world, why influencer was chosen. So again, I'm guilty of that too. I don't always think about the end customer, but when you think about it and you dive deep, how did growing up seeing advertising impact you? And then think about it in 2021 terms, how is the content you're sharing on social media? How's that impacting your brand perception? How's that impacting your end customer? Are you engaging with them? So I'm gonna show a few examples that I actually like beginning. One is with Verbo. They showed John Legend and Chrissy Teigen, which one is already a multicultural family. Yes, Chrissy Teigen has her own issues here and there. She's a hot mess. But overall, don't take away from the message of Verbo. It's a great message. It shows a multicultural family. And I love it because even though she's a hot mess, she's representing for Thailand. So I got to get my representation where I can get it. So I'm happy. And it also shows different types of families coming together within Destination. So that's why I love it. And even just hearing John Legend's voice over the B-roll footage that they add shows, it makes you feel some kind of way, in a good way. And that's why I actually do like this commercial, regardless of some issues that some of the actors might have in it. And I'm not gonna play the entire commercials in its entirety just because of timing. The other one is Orbit. And I really love this too, because when you think about LGBTQ marketing, you mostly see two gay men at the forefront. And that's what a lot of times brands kind of advertise to. It's like, these are two gay men, we're targeting the gay community, which is fine and all. But on Orbis, I like the fact that they use two female presenting individuals to be the star of the commercial. That's very rare that you see an LGBTQ ad where it's really focusing on two female presenting leads. So this is another example of what I like. Rihanna, whether you like her music or not, I'm gonna say she's queen. She broke the freaking standards on beauty industry. Before Fenty Beauty, who were the models on the beauty campaigns? There were fair-skinned models, white-passing models, and you might get lighter-skinned Black American models. But Fenty changed all that by having a darker-skinned model compared to like a lighter-skinned model. She had the full spectrum. And then even with her Savage Fenty commercial on Amazon, her runway show, she blew Victoria's Secret out of the water. Victoria's Secret is now trying to catch up to Rihanna, which came out just a handful of years ago. Her fashion show featured drag queens, transgender people, it featured bigger people, it featured average sized people, and it featured traditional models as well. She really showed the full spectrum, and I really respect her for that. If anyone works with her, please give her my email, because I would love to work with Rihanna. Another commercial that really impacted my childhood again, and everyone here might have seen it too, but it's a 7-Up commercial that came out in the 90s. I was in elementary school and I was trying to figure out my own identity. I was trying to figure out if I was gay, if I liked guys, or maybe it was a phase. But seeing commercials like this, again, whoever was in the boardroom or the creative brainstorm room of 7-Up was like, let's make a gay joke and put it in the prison setting to promote 7-Up. But again, as a little 9-year-old or a little 10-year-old gay kid in Alabama seeing a commercial like this, it makes me think, okay, there's prison rape jokes, there's homosexuality in prison, and it's a bad thing because they make little jokes of like, oh, everyone's your best friend, and he looks kind of like uncomfortable. So that reinforced the message from 7-Up to me, being that little gay kid saying homosexuality is wrong. So that's just an example of how like the advertising can impact someone's mentality kind of growing up. Another example of that I think is really fantastic is the Apple Pride Watch Day launch. Yes, I do agree Apple can do more throughout the year, but I do want to call out some good things. You know, everything's a step in the right direction. I do love the fact that their staff marched in the SF Pride Parade, but I also like the fact that they tried, to represent everyone within the community. If you look at the watch, you have the traditional rainbow colors, which represent the LGBTQ flag. You have the black and the brown colors to represent the fallen brothers of the Black and Latinx community. You have the light pink, white, and light blue colors to represent the trans and the non-binary communities. So subtly, they really try to represent, and again, using real people from that community to represent their products. Here's another commercial I saw. I think I was in high school around the time. And I'm not gonna lie, again, being a gay kid in Alabama, not having many gay references to look up to, I liked it at first. I'm like, oh, it's kind of cool, two guys kissing or eating a Snicker bar. But then this scene happens where they kind of move away. I think we just and what does that do? That reinforces toxic masculinity. It reinforces that men can't kiss men. It reinforces that you're wrong and you'd rather drink chemicals versus than kissing a man. So again, being that little gay kid in a small town, seeing stuff like this makes me think, I need to hate myself more. I don't belong. And then again, going back to that little 8-year-old Romey, where my colleagues and my peers were telling me, you're not American enough, you're too feminine, you don't belong here, you're never gonna belong. And then going home and seeing a commercial like this, it does impact the mentality of someone. And our job as marketers, we have to do a better job at that. We have to think about, one, how do we sell product? How do we get people to visit a destination? And how is that gonna impact the customer that we want to actually purchase or book or stay in our hotel? Those are little elements that we as marketers just gotta do better in terms of overall when we think about inclusive marketing. Now, hopefully I'll leave you guys with a few tips we can walk away and learn a little bit of something as well. What can you do? One, always hire a multicultural agency or an agency with DEI at the focus. Whoever you're targeting, you need to have someone from that community. Because one, how are you gonna target an LGBTQ community and have all straight people on your team? That misses the mark. Yeah, exactly. I cannot relate to a cisgender, heterosexual white man's experience. I'm never gonna relate to that. So if I was gonna create a product for that person, what the hell am I gonna talk about? I'm gonna hire someone of that community to speak to that community. And same thing when I see people targeting the Asian American community. And then you look at the staff of the advertiser, the creative director, the production assistant, the executive, the brand representative, and they're all white people. So I'm like, how are you gonna tell me what the Asian American experience is when you don't have anyone from the Asian American community? And the same thing can be LGBTQ. You just need someone from that community. And I always tell my clients too, if you wanna target something, make sure someone on the team or someone behind the scenes or even in front of the camera is from that community. Another thing is also just talking about just researching. There are things that can be offensive to one culture and not the other culture. And also just knowing the fact that you wanna be authentic. I think it was your example that you mentioned earlier where they wanted to target the LGBT community, but they just hired actors to be couples or kind of showing that. And to a point that can be effective, you gotta do what you can do, but at the end of the day, are you really telling the story? Are you sharing the authentic relationship of a homosexual or a lesbian couple that you're trying to target? So again, it's just doing the research. And you need recommendations on an agency for multicultural diversity. I know a good one. I mean, I work for one, so I'm here. I'm gonna be here all week. Well, it's Tuesday, so hit me up anytime. Another thing, again, as I mentioned, research culture, don't necessarily profit off of it. If you wanna make an homage, and I'll say this, the fashion industry is very guilty of this. I started my career in fashion. I was one of those people just carrying on, promoting different cultures, not realizing the impact it has on someone that we're borrowing it from. So again, if you're gonna make an homage or show appreciation for a culture, just make sure you understand the meaning behind it. Another thing I always tell brands too, especially if you're targeting Asian Americans, is avoid religious icons. And that includes Buddha. In Thailand, there's a lot of signs if you go to Thailand saying do not put Buddha on your t-shirt, don't use it as decor. It's very offensive to the Buddhist community. And a lot of times when you have American brands trying to use Asian motifs in their branding, it comes off very wrong. There's a kombucha brand, which the name really slipped my mind right now because I blocked them on social media because I was very mad at them. But that's an example of someone of my generation, a millennial showing support or showing protest. But it was a kombucha brand. Their logo was a Buddha, and then when I researched it, it was two white guys that was making the brand. So I blocked them. I had my protest. There's another brand that uses a lot of Thai design. If you look at the long neck tribes in Thailand, or even going to Chiang Mai and seeing the local people and their designs, and Tia and I being from Thailand, we can kind of spot our Thai design. It's called Y wear. And like they use, and Y in Thailand is when you greet someone. It's kind of showing respect. The lower the bow, the more respect you have. So when you have a brand targeting LGBTQ men and you have models in booty shorts using Thai designs, it comes off very wrong. So that's another example of taking aspects of a culture, not researching it, not in naming your product Y wear, when Y literally is all about respect and it stems from Buddhism in our culture. That's very wrong. You're profiting off our culture. And the fact is, you're, again, two white men creating a product based off Thai culture, not understanding the significance of it, and then using it to promote to the LGBTQ audience by using traditional hot models in short shorts, shaking their butts, or being very sexually provocative. Again, there's nothing wrong with being sexually provocative. I support that. Very sex positive. But again, when you're taking it from my culture, I want you to understand where that's coming from. So those are just little action items that I always try to give our clients of like how we can show an homage or show an appreciation to something that we want to take inspiration from. But also we want to do it the right way. Yep, and that's pretty much it. I went through this pretty faster than I thought. But yeah, if I'm here if anyone has any questions, or do you want to take it from here? Yeah, and I'm very happy. I didn't sit down. I didn't get out of breath.
Seat for a minute. That was awesome. That was great. Where are you based, by the way?
New York City.
Okay,
but we have offices in Dallas and Denver as well.
Okay. You said a couple of things that piqued my curiosity. The first one was when you were a little gay kid, you were glad there wasn't social media, so you could go home and continue to be left out.
Yeah.
I think your words were reminded how I didn't fit in.
Exactly.
That's a really interesting take on social media, because I think a lot of people use it today for kind of the opposite. They tend to surround themselves with the echo chamber of who they are. But I guess what you were saying at the time and the place, that wasn't something.
No, yeah. I'm older than I look. So yeah, in the 90s, it was like, in the late 80s, it was just all print and TV. So I can go home and not have the kid making fun of me in the lunchroom in my DMs or emailing me.
Right.
I didn't have a cell phone, so they couldn't
Bullying
call me.
digitally,
Yeah.
right.
The bullying stopped when I got home, but the messaging of what they were saying was reminded to me by opening a magazine, by turning the TV on.
And you made a strong point about cultural appropriation in a toxic way, and I think that's a good word for it, the use of Buddha again. How would a brand respectfully enter into a cultural opening? I understand why brands want to do that. I understand that they want to have their expression of authenticity, if they can, through a community. If I heard you correctly, you're saying hire the correct agency with the right people who live and speak and fluidly understand where they are. Because why?
Because we can tell the stories. If, say for example, you're a brand trying to reach the LGBTQ audience, but you hire an agency full of cisgender, heterosexual men and women, they're not going to understand the experience. They're not going to understand why being spoken with is more important than being spoken to. They're not going to appreciate the fact that, oh my God, Apple made a watch dedicated to my community. They don't understand the gravity of that. And being of an LGBTQ community and being a writer in the room, being the creative director on a photo shoot, being the account executive, trying to persuade the client, you kind of need that person from that community. We can tell the stories. We know the pain of being ignored, and we know the appreciation of being spoken to and spoken with.
There's an example that came to mind when you said that. I don't know if anyone followed Trader Joe's when they had Trader Jose's on some of their Mexican or Latin dishes, and Trader Giuseppe's when they had their Italian stuff. And a person who worked for Trader Joe's took Trader Joe's to task for this. And now Trader Joe's no longer does Trader Jose's and Giuseppe's like that, because you think that's a mild example of what you're talking about?
Yeah, I think it was someone in the boardroom saying, "Oh, let's be ethnic. Let's connect with these ethnic communities by making these names." But they didn't ask anyone from those communities. Like, even for example, we do a lot of Southeast Asian tourism, but we also represent a lot of Latin American spirit brands. I'm not the one doing the storytelling. I might be the one talking to the client, kind of coming up with the strategies, but I make sure my team has people from that community on it. We have 3 Hispanic/Latinx people on our team working on our Latin American brands, because I'm not gonna be the right person communicating that story. My colleague Cindy is, she's Colombian. My colleague Alexandro from Mexico is gonna be able to tell that story better than I can. So I make sure I hire people.
That's a tremendous point. Any questions from the crowd for Romey? Aaron, do you got something?
I'm just trying to format how to ask this question, but I have my own business and of course consulting with Cedar Rapids Tourism. The question of representation and authenticity in your representation. For an example, Cedar Rapids Tourism has created 2 videos promoting the city. One of them is a general audience, and then the other is a specific LGBTQ. There's B-roll used in both. So there is LGBTQ representation and other representation in the general video. Is there a way to maybe further that authenticity so it doesn't look like we're pandering?
Yeah, I think DJ brought up the good point during his presentation that if that video was shared beyond June and there's other campaigns supporting that, I think that's a good way to kind of show that you're not just ticking the box off. That's one of the great things I do love about, for example, with Thailand tourism. And even though I am Thai, and I'm not saying this because of that background, but we do target the LGBT community throughout the year. And I love the country for that. I mean, the country's not perfect in terms of what's going on, but the fact is they do invest in the community beyond Pride Month. So I think having your general videos that show glimpses of LGBTQ, I think that's fantastic. And I Love New York does a great example too, where they feature LGBTQ people, but they don't really show the rainbow flag. They just show people in their everyday lives. And that's their way of kind of giving a nod to the LGBTQ community throughout the year. So I think showing that video, having other campaign messaging supporting that, even bringing press, LGBTQ press to Cedar Rapids to kind of like learn more about it outside of Pride. I think those are ways to kind of like elevate your penetration to that market. And it's going to be a progress. It's not a one-time done deal. It's something you have to kind of do throughout and keep building upon it.
Listen, thanks for being here and thanks for supporting this. I could listen to you talk all day, but give it up for him once more, please.
Thank you.
Romey.